points where Hello, welcome to episode 201 of the How to Survive podcast. I'd like to introduce you to my very great friend from Southampton. His name is Chris Morris. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Despite having watched Midsommar.
Yes.
Which is racking, I'd say. Puts you through... It's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
It's... That's all the racking.
That's all the racking it does.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening to the How to Survive podcast. No, it's intense, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Would you recommend people watch it?
I would, yeah. It's
Okay.
a very interesting film to talk about.
Yeah, quite an arty film, so maybe your local picture house will be showing it,
Mm-hmm.
but you might be able to get lucky and find it in a multiplex near you for a few more weeks. Or you could wait, because Ari Aster has just announced that there will be a 4-hour version released,
Yeah.
which is not long enough for my liking.
Yeah, well, interestingly, he said that, the festival that they go to in Midsommar is a 9-day festival.
Yes.
The film ends after the 4th day.
Really?
Yes.
That is interesting.
That is interesting. More insight like that coming up.
Yeah. Just a quick note to anyone who's just tuned in.
Mm.
Last week was our 200th episode,
Mm-hmm.
and it was full of celebrations. We found out that I'm going to be a father.
Yes.
Live on air. We found out that we have a Patreon now.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can now support How to Survive on Patreon.
It's up to you, which is the more impressive.
Yeah, any support you can give Joe for his upcoming baby.
Yeah. Baby shoes are expensive, I'm told. So.
That would mean a great deal. And you can unlock extra episodes of the podcast. You can help fund future podcast series and possibly marathons.
Yeah, you always say possibly in front of that.
Yeah, there's a reason for
Reserve
that.
the right to
Yeah.
fix it.
Yeah. So head on over to patreon.com/howtosurvivepod to find out more.
If you haven't listened to the How to Survive podcast before, we are full of spoilers. Not intentionally, but if we want to get to the nub of the issue, we do need to spoil it rotten, essentially.
Yeah, and it is all nubs.
Yes, nothing but nubs. So if you haven't seen Midsommar, do go and seek it out. It is a wonderful film. Family feel-good film of the year. Do not watch it with children because it is very upsetting.
Also, do not watch it on a first date or any sort of in any relationship which is not 100% secure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What have you done any first date movie faux pas?
The first date I went to see with my current girlfriend was Never Let Me Go.
That's okay.
Yes, pretty bleak.
Yeah, but like for perspective, when I was 15, I took a girl to see Babel.
Right. Yeah.
Which is mental.
Well, you took your current wife,
Yeah.
your now wife,
Yeah.
to see The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
Yeah, first one was Iron Man. Second one was Boy in the Striped Pajamas. We also saw,
amazing that only one of them became a franchise, isn't it?
the other one we saw was Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Right.
So
Nice.
if any
What a
18-year-old boys are
selection.
listening, I recommend the work of John le Carré, made into movies for impressing your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Midsommar after this.
I told you that I want to go to that festival in Sweden.
No, you said it would be cool to go.
Yeah, and then I got the opportunity and I decided
Look, I
to
don't
do
mind
it.
you going. I just wish you would have told me. That's all.
Dude, she needs a therapist. You've been wanting out of this stupid relationship for like a year now.
And don't forget about all of the beautiful Swedish women you'll meet in June.
Okay, guys.
That's not her again. Seriously?
Babe, what's happening? Danny.
I was so very sorry to hear about what happened.
I'm sorry.
I invited Danny to come to Sweden. You know what she's been going through.
Christian says you've got this special week planned.
It's sort of a crazy festival. Special ceremonies and dressing up.
That sounds fun.
Unbelievable.
Welcome and happy midsummer. Skål!
What time is it?
9 p.m.
That can't be right. The sky is blue.
This is what 9 p.m. is like here.
So a quick recap of Midsommar, but for those who were so bewildered by it that they've forgotten what happened. Danny receives news that her whole family has died and enters a deep depression. To say they died is...
Here comes the sun.
Yeah. She seeks solace in her boyfriend Christian, but he is distant and preoccupied, leaving her
It's alright.
feeling even more isolated. Out of guilt and awkwardness, Christian invites Danny to join a trip to Sweden with some of his friends. Trip organizer and native Swede Pelle, Mark, and Josh, who is writing his thesis on Swedish folk communities. They are visiting Pelle's village of Haga, where the Midsummer Festival is taking place.
Yes.
The festival happens once every 90 years, so this is quite an event.
Yeah.
Still struggling with her grief, Danny tries to throw herself into the trip, but when they arrive in Sweden, having driven for many hours, the first thing they do is take magic mushrooms. Danny hears someone mention family, just like in conversation.
Incidentally, yeah.
And has a panic attack. Not the first or the last.
No.
Basically, the whole movie is her on the verge of a panic attack because she has not adequately... she's dealing with a lot of grief.
Yeah.
Let's not blame her.
No.
She's gone through a lot.
Yeah.
The festival begins and is suitably unusual. The community are incredibly welcoming, but have some unique beliefs about life cycles, recycling, and human interaction with nature. This is writ large during the first day of the festival when two of the older adults in the group throw themselves from a cliff, ostensibly giving their lives so another generation can be born.
Yeah, this is That's Fine, the film.
Yeah.
Right.
You mean
basically, we have I guess you'd call it a meme.
Yeah.
Which is that when you're watching a horror movie and something happens and, it's the classic thing of like, oh, everything's fine. Here's a man with tentacles for arms. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Right. And you're supposed to just watch it like the characters in the film or something, just gloss over it.
Yeah, that's fine.
In a way that's like, there's a man who's made out of spiders and that's fine.
Yeah.
Right. This is like the ultimate.
Yeah.
They've just been like shown round the village.
Yeah.
And it's like, here's a bear in a cage and that's fine.
Yeah.
Here's a mural of a woman menstruating and putting her menstrual blood into a drink and giving it to a man and that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, it's just that.
Yeah.
Constantly, and it reaches a peak, and then the people throw themselves from the peak, and there we are.
Yeah, and it's not like it cuts. It
Oh,
shows them impacting on the rock underneath, and their brains coming out of their heads. Except for the guy who lands on his leg and has to be bludgeoned by another member of the crowd who is like only too happy to oblige.
Yeah, and all the rest of the crowd starts screaming along with his screams while he's lying wounded on the ground.
The visiting Americans,
that's fine,
along with some of the Brits who were brought along by another member of the village, are all appalled by what they see. Danny prepares to leave, but Pelle takes her to one side and explains that it's important to him that she meets the members of the village. He says he suffered the loss of his parents in a fire when he was a child, and the group rallied round him, and so he was raised in the loving arms of the community. He thinks she will experience recovery from her grief if she opens her heart to the villagers. Meanwhile, Mark, who is like Christian's dickhead friend basically, urinates on a sacred tree and is dragged away and murdered off screen by another villager.
Well, he's dragged away by his friends, isn't he? And then in a later scene, a girl invites him off.
Yeah.
Basically says, "Oh, you come with me," and
that's fine.
And that's fine.
Yeah, I had to abridge it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
In attempting to leave, the Brits also go missing.
Yeah.
In the dead of night, Josh sneaks into the village temple and attempts to photograph their sacred text, despite being told that it is forbidden. He is bludgeoned to death by someone wearing Mark's face as a mask, and that's fine. This leaves just Danny and Christian reveling with the group, and revels are plenty.
Yeah.
There are 9 days to the festival, but due to the sun setting around midnight and rising shortly afterwards, it's almost impossible to say how much time has actually elapsed.
Mm-hmm.
Danny gets involved in village cooking traditions and eventually enters a maypole dancing contest, which she inadvertently wins, becoming May Queen and beloved by the town.
Yeah.
While she's off frolicking with other members of the village, Christian is drugged by a village girl named Maya. Well, not by her specifically, but it seems to be she's got designs on him, and the rest of the village are drugging him in order to get him to... Well,
he's also served a pie that contains her pubic hair.
Yeah.
And a drink that implicitly contains her menstrual blood.
And I think we may have said this before, but that's fine. Having been increasingly mesmerised by her, he's led into a temple where she is laying naked, with the elder women of the group also naked around her, kind of chanting.
Mm-hmm.
And they have sex. That is Christian and Maya. And the women in the group all join in, appearing to copy and amplify every noise that she makes.
Mm-hmm.
This is a group experience, and that's okay. Returning from her excursion, Danny hears the commotion and looks in to see Christian cheating on her with Maya. She has a panic attack, and the younger women of the village join in, emulating her emotional state and supporting her through it.
Yeah.
After completing his sexual side story, Christian runs into a chicken shack where he is attacked by villagers and paralyzed with some kind of herb. In a final ceremony, the May Queen is told to choose the week's final sacrifice, a willing villager or Christian who, as we've just said, is paralyzed. She chooses Christian, and he is burned alive in a temple along with the bodies of all of their friends and 2 willing members of the village.
Yeah.
Danny is at first upset and then appears to be pleased with the outcome. And that, my friend, is Midsommar.
Yes.
What did you think of that?
Well, we went to see this film together, and afterwards
our semi-annual nasty movie.
We have a friend called Ben, and we have seen It Comes at Night,
The Witch,
Hereditary. It's basically every 6 months we go to see a devastating film.
Yeah, all produced by A24 as well.
Yeah, they have a very good hit rate for leaving you destroyed emotionally.
Yeah.
We came out of this film and you were much more positive about it than I was. I think that's fair to say. But that's not to say that I didn't enjoy it, and it's not to say that I don't think it's a good film. I don't think it has the visceral quality that Hereditary did, for me at least. Hereditary had me sort of balled up in my seat because I was so tense and uncomfortable with what was happening, whereas this did not give anywhere near the same sort of physical reaction, and I think that is to a large extent intentional. That's, the intention of the film is not to provide you with the same sort of visceral quality that you have from Hereditary, but I can't say that I didn't miss it. And a lot of the film's joys come from digging into the subtext and the layers of the film that you sort of think about afterwards.
Yes, exactly. It's a grower, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's a very artfully constructed film, and there is a lot to be picked apart and discussed. Interestingly, Ari Aster originally wanted Hereditary to be a family drama and wanted this to be his first horror movie.
Okay.
But I think Hereditary is by far the scarier and nastier film, and this is The Wicker Man for woke millennials.
Maybe. I think you probably, and I didn't think this is unfair to say, because I was as well, were basically expecting Hereditary 2.
Mm-hmm.
And on that basis, the movie's a bit of a disappointment because, I don't know, it's not, you're right, it's not as grueling all the way through.
No.
Right?
It's a very different kind of horror movie.
Yeah, yes. As a traditional horror movie, this is a failure, but it's not trying to be that, I don't think. And I think it's trying to challenge your expectations in a huge number of ways, which we're going to discuss as we go on. And I think it's very deftly executed and thrilling to watch anyway. But I mean, it's almost like a sister movie to Hereditary, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Both are about women going through unspeakable levels of grief and the effect that it has on them, and in particular their ways of coping with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't blame Annie in Hereditary for trying to contact the dead, just as you don't really blame Danny for embracing the villagers.
Yeah.
Even though there's a bit of a flaw to that plan.
Yeah,
because
there's a lot going on that maybe she should think twice about.
Right, but it's the same with, Annie and Hereditary.
Yeah.
Like, they're kind of inviting trouble into their lives because of the grief they're experiencing. I think the strongest parts of Midsommar, it makes a very compelling social commentary, I think. And it's an absolutely astonishing appraisal of the effect of our individualized society on its most vulnerable members. I'll explain more on that as we move through the podcast. I don't want to get too bogged down in theory up top, but I just wanted to say that I absolutely loved Midsommar. I think it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. And the more I think about it, the more I really just want to watch it again.
That is high praise indeed. I think the film would definitely reward multiple viewings. I haven't seen it again. Obviously, it's still in the cinema at the time of recording. There's definitely a lot of foreshadowing that I picked up on just on a first watch. For example, there's a painting of a princess and a bear hanging above Danny's bed in America, which obviously then plays into the events of the film later on.
Yeah, it's hanging over her, would you say? Yeah,
well, and also I would say that that's a representation of her. It almost works like a representation of her grief in that, she has this thing hanging over her. Then she goes to Sweden and she's got this thing locked up. And then at the end of the film, she releases it by burning it and is much happier. Yeah. Which we didn't mention explicitly in your recap, that Christian, before he's burned alive in the temple, is sewn into the body of a bear. And that is fine.
No, you're right. I mean, there's certain points where it's like things are introduced in the first act or the first half an hour, and you revisit those ideas repeatedly throughout it. Like Christian's thesis. He hasn't got a thesis idea. Now he has a thesis idea. Now he's in competition with Josh, and now Josh is dead and he's been sewn into a bear. The classic story.
Yeah. Tale as old as time. I think there's a lot that would reward a second viewing, definitely.
I think where Hereditary and The Witch crescendoed to an absolutely horrific feeling, like you said, balled up in your seat. I think in both movies, when we came out, we went for pizza. Yeah. And I said that I felt like I've been electrocuted. It's just mayhem.
Yeah.
And I think that this is almost a horror movie in reverse, in as much as you get the horrific mayhem in the opening 10 minutes, and it slowly smooths out the horror, right? It's with a beautiful setting. There's flowers. There's sunlight.
Yeah,
everyone's really happy, but there's horrific imagery. But it's like it fades over pictures of flowers, and it's like, this is all natural.
Yeah,
a mutilated head being burned is just as natural as flowers, right? That's what the movie is suggesting, and it's like you become more accustomed to it, and it smooths out the horror. But that's the clever part of it, because afterwards you're like, that was awful. Like, why did I ever think that was okay?
Yeah.
Right? And Pella ultimately was telling the truth about the group being able to support her. So you find yourself at the end thinking like, yeah, burn Christian, because he's a bad part of your life.
Yeah.
And the group are really good for you.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what am I talking about?
Yeah.
We've just seen them flay a man.
You shouldn't be burning anyone alive.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's like, it's a happy ending, but not one that you will ever feel particularly comfortable in finding yourself being happy about, because it's so odd. Horror movie in reverse is my theory.
I think that's a very good theory, especially as it opens in darkness and with like the most profound horror like that is imaginable.
Yeah, so I glossed over it in the intro. Essentially, her sister, who I think she says is bipolar in the movie, has texted her something along the lines of, it's very dark right now and I'm going to take care of mum and dad. Something along those lines, right?
Yeah, mum and dad are coming with me.
Right, exactly. So obviously Danny's very panicked by that, but it seems to be that her sister has said things like this in the past, and Christian and other friends think it's she's just acting up. She just wants the attention. Unfortunately, it turns out she's telling the truth this time, and she's murdered the parents and taken her own life. It's a horrible.
It's
scene.
like one of the most harrowing. So not only that, but Danny's reaction.
Oh God, yeah.
Is one of the most harrowing things I've ever seen in a film.
Yeah,
and it's not.
It's like Hereditary.
It's just
Annie's reaction in Hereditary when she's experiencing grief.
Yeah, it's very, very like that. Yeah. Where Annie is like on all fours on the floor, it's just screaming.
Yeah,
it's very similar reaction in this with Danny, but there's something extremely mundane about like the cause and effect of that grief. You know, it's a objectively horrible thing that could realistically happen in real life, and that is the realistic response to it.
Yeah,
but it's so horrifying.
Yeah,
and
I think it's the way it's amazingly directed film, and it's that creeping dread where you know something's not right.
Yeah.
Like, it's the naivety of the characters, the dramatic irony of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Where you're like, you know something's going to drop, and you're just waiting for the bomb to go off, and it's like
when it
not
does.
literally a bomb. That's not the method, but it's pretty upsetting, I'd say. Which, I mean, that leads on to neatly to my point about the movie being an allegory for how our society deals with grief and trauma. You know, there's a lot of very lonely people in our society, and when I keep saying our society, what I mean by that is, you know, the
traditional Anglo-Saxon, or Anglo-Saxon based
the Western
culture.
world, right? Yeah.
Which obviously Nordic culture is Western, but it's this is a very specific.
Yeah, I mean Judeo-Christian.
Yeah.
If you watch EastEnders or Fox News, either of those, then you belong to that society, right?
Yeah.
Or if you know what those are, you probably are. Ultimately, there's a lot of very lonely people in our society whose lives could be improved by just having someone to talk to about their problems or to validate their feelings when they're feeling shit, right? And I think dealing with the suicide of a loved one can, in some ways, be an even greater trauma than a death from natural causes, let's say. If an elderly relative dies of an illness, they're missed, but it's somewhat expected because they're old, and you know, you can come to terms with that more easily, I think, than you can when someone takes their own life, because it suggests that they were suffering a great deal. And I think the loved one who's left behind carries a lot of guilt about it. You know, they don't, not in every case, perhaps, but you can see how that would come up. And you know, they feel like they could have done something. And I think Florence Pugh nails that level of grief in her acting. Like you said, it's traumatizing to watch.
Yeah, it's harrowing beyond belief.
I've spoken to people who've been in similar situations, not as awful as hers is, and they're all awful. But this is, it's dramatically engineered to be as awful as possible.
Yes.
Right? Often I think what people in the experiencing those kinds of emotions need is somebody to talk to, because if you're around people who are experiencing the same thing, they're all just going to say the same thing, right? But I think that's why I was so affected by how little support she got from Christian, because he basically made up his mind to finish with her minutes before he got the phone call saying, my whole family are dead, right?
Yeah.
And I think the film dances with how responsible he ought to feel and how responsible he is for her feelings by making it clear that he's kind of morally compelled to be with her but doesn't want to be.
He's essentially like an empty chair in their relationship,
right,
isn't he? Because he doesn't remember her birthday. He's very obviously made to be a bad boyfriend.
Yeah. He's
disinterested. He's absent-minded. He's not really engaging with anything that she's going through.
Like, it seems, even if you take away the fact that he's her boyfriend, he doesn't want to be there. He finds the whole thing incredibly uncomfortable, which it is, don't get me wrong. But there's a lack of like, even just like human connection that he's just missing. It's like the whole thing's a chore to him, just to like comfort his girlfriend when she's lost her family.
Yeah.
And that I found to be quite a difficult scene. And But he's. I think it's fleshed out well enough that you can't really blame him entirely.
Yeah, it's a deeply uncomfortable situation. Like you understand even if you don't empathize with his situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like no one.
He's not responsible for her, right?
No, but he is. It's like basically it's one of those social situations where he is trapped. He is trapped in that relationship to some extent because no one would ever
forgive him
for leaving Danny in that time.
Yes. In any case, he's not giving her what she needs, right? And I think Pella recognizes that.
Yeah.
And that's why he keeps saying, like, you're going to really enjoy this.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are so supportive. They do take that responsibility for you. Not just like one person will do that, but the whole village will recognize your grief and will share that grief with you and will like pull you up by something. They'll bring you back to where you need to be, right? They'll support you through your grief. And that scene at the end when they're all crying on their knees is like so starkly different from like, it was like her in the center of the frame with a vacant staring boyfriend who's just giving her no comfort.
Yeah.
And then you can mirror that with the scene where there's like 15 people all on their knees, all screaming along with her. And you're like, it's so surreal, but it feels like really deeply moving. And like, you feel like she's supported in that when before she was completely isolated from it.
Yeah, like she's literally surrounded by people who are empathizing with her.
Yeah, exactly.
In every possible way.
And they're all essentially strangers as well. It's just that's the sort of society they live in, which is why it's so alluring. And like, even though they're massively flawed in various ways, you can't deny the fact that they are supportive for those reasons.
They are supportive, but only to Danny.
But that's because the others basically reject them.
Yeah, I mean, we can get on to your next point, which is about the commune.
Right. So I say commune, the village, whatever you want to call it, the community. They are wrong by our standards, right? And I think a lot of what we would do is wrong by their standards.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is cultural relativism, right? Things that are things are understood to be acceptable in some cultures which aren't in others, and things are norms societally in some cultures that aren't in others.
So I've been reading a book lately by Yuval Noah Harari. You may have heard of it. Sapiens. You heard of that?
Yeah.
And he writes about how nothing we do culturally is basically natural, right? It's all made up. It's all ideological. And can I read you a passage from that? Sure. Which resonated with me when I watched this film. This is about cultures generally, and it compares, he's talking about, as I said, our society. Yeah. Judeo-Christian. So you could perhaps compare that with the commune in the movie. Culture tends to argue that it forbids only that which is unnatural. But from a biological perspective, nothing is unnatural. Whatever is possible is by definition also natural. A truly unnatural behaviour, one that goes against the laws of nature, simply cannot exist, so it would not need prohibition. No culture has ever bothered to forbid men to photosynthesize, women to run faster than the speed of light, or negatively charged electrons to be attracted to each other. In truth, our concepts natural and unnatural are taken not from biology, but from Christian theology. The theological meaning of natural is in accordance with the intentions of the God who created nature. Christian theologians argued that God created the human body, intending each limb and organ to serve a particular purpose. If we use our limbs and organs for the purpose envisioned by God, then it is a natural activity. To use them differently than God intends is unnatural. But evolution has no purpose. Organs have not evolved with a purpose, and the way they are used is in constant flux. There is no single organ in the human body that only does the job its prototype did when it first appeared hundreds of millions of years ago. Organs evolve to perform a particular function, but once they exist, they can be adapted for other usages as well. Mouths, for example, appeared because the earliest multicellular organisms needed a way to take nutrients into their bodies. We still use our mouths for that purpose, but we also use them to kiss, speak, and if we are Rambo, to pull the pins out of hand grenades. Are any of those unnatural simply because our worm-like ancestors didn't do those things with their mouths? It goes on like that. basically suggesting that
nothing is real, everything is permitted.
Is that Assassin's Creed?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. But my point is, we think, it's unnatural to do that. It's unnatural to skin people alive and put their lungs outside their body like they do to that guy.
Yeah.
But it's just like they just have different beliefs.
Yeah, but while you are correct, there has to be a moral line drawn.
But that morality is based on.
I know. I get that it's cultural relativism.
Yeah.
But with that said, you could basically apply that to any horror movie villain and say that their behavior is appropriate within their own morality, which is true, right? But you have to have some sort of objective handle on what is right and wrong. And in this instance,
well, how many people have to believe in it for it to be okay?
But like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because if you have an objective view, like,
but there is no objective morality.
Right? Yeah, there's no right. Correct. There is no objective view on what is right and wrong culturally, but there are certain agreed upon societal norms, right, that exist worldwide, such as to count essentially as objective morality, right? Which is, I agree that they are based on theological texts that have existed for thousands of years and were made with all sorts of various motives behind them. But, find me a, developed culture of more than like a tiny fragmented group of people that believe murder is fine. Find me a group.
United States of America have death penalty.
Well, for starters, that's tarring an entire country with an opinion that they don't necessarily share, fine. Right? But
that's a society.
Yeah, okay. But that's the views and tenets of a small subset of that society.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, they kill people there.
Yeah, I know. I'm not here to justify murder. And in many ways, what you're doing is disproving your own point, because surely you should be saying, leave them to it, because that is, by their standards.
I'm not judging them. I'm saying.
Well, yeah, but then
you asked me to give you an example, and I did.
Okay, fine, but then do you think that the death penalty is okay because it exists within their culture?
No, I don't. I personally, I don't think it's okay.
No, exactly.
But
so do you believe that the murders of Christian, Josh, and Mark, and Simon and Connie are justified because they exist within a cultural paradigm that group has established?
My point is that my own beliefs about what is right and wrong don't affect what happens in the movie, which is the entire point of it. Right?
Yes, it is, but then you have to draw your opinion on what the characters do in the movie from some sort of cultural standpoint.
You do, but that's exactly the point. They refuse to acknowledge that any way of life could be different to their own, right? And they get punished for that by that culture.
That's not strictly true, because the two of the characters are there specifically to study cultures that are different,
but only as an artifact, not as I want to.
I agree that they approach it with a level of arrogance that is at times contemptible, but it's not more contemptible than murdering people and stringing them up in a chicken coop with their lungs out of their back, right?
Yeah,
they
but
are.
That's...
The cult are, to their credit, relatively straightforward about some things, right? And there's plenty of evidence to suggest that they're telling the truth with a lot of the things that they say. For example, how often they do the rituals and how they believe in 4 seasons of life and all that sort of thing, right? But they still kill Josh, Mark, Christian, Simon, Connie, and they still trick people into coming, which through deception, and prevent them from leaving once they're at the commune.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say by the moral compass of 99% of the world, that is abhorrent behaviour. And that is why they and let's remember that we're not talking about a real culture here. So it's not behoven on me to say or each to their own or whatever, right? This is a horror movie, right? The point of which is to horrify.
Yeah.
And in this context, the context of the film, what is horrifying is their culture and their society.
I agree.
And the activities that they partake in.
But there's a line which is expressed in the movie, which I think is a good counterpoint to that, which is when the old people throw themselves from the cliff, one of the elder women of the group pulls the American aside and says, "Oh, we should have told you more about this. I'm sorry. This is what we do when we get to a certain age, and it's better than we feel that it's better than leaving us to just deteriorate in a lonely in an old people saying, which is what you do in your society. That is abhorrent to us, right? So,
right. Here's my question: do you believe that she is telling that? Well, I guess there's two questions. Do you think that she is telling them that truthfully? So do you think that is actually what the cult practice? Okay. Do you believe...
There's nothing else in the movie that makes me think that they're lying.
Okay. Do you believe that her intentions are, like her thing of, oh, I'm really sorry, we should have told you more about this. Do you think that that's genuine in any way?
Yes.
I don't believe
she admonishes not Pella, but the other one. I can't remember his name. Like Pella's
equivalent
who went to Britain.
I think it's an act.
I don't think so. I think
it is an act because Pella doesn't tell them about it either. So it's not that the cult has some established thing of like...
No, but they know about it already because they study it. Like Josh knows about it and Christian knows about it as well. And they're both like, oh my God, I didn't know it would happen like that. Like they knew it was going to happen. The only person who didn't know in that group was Danny. And the other guy went to bed.
He misses it. Yeah. So I think... I get what you're saying, and the film says a lot of interesting things about cultural relativism, and the quote that you read from was very interesting and a very apt selection. But I think to a large extent you're playing devil's advocate, and you're imagining this on a... In some ways, you're guilty of the same thing that Christian and Josh are doing, which is that you're like philosophizing their culture as though it doesn't exist in a reality, right? Which is fine to do because it doesn't, because it's a fictional movie. But were you there and you were doing that, you'd be in some ways guilty of the same thing that they're doing.
But you're only guilty of the laws of the place you came from, not the place where you are.
Fine, but like I said,
if you went to Saudi Arabia and they were executing somebody,
Saudi Arabia doesn't allow you to walk around murdering people in the streets, as far as I'm aware.
No, it doesn't.
No, exactly, right?
It
doesn't allow you to abduct and murder people and burn them alive in
But it appears to
temples.
be that that's what the society has agreed is the way forward. It's not like an individual is doing that. It's not an abhorrent thing in this community. It's not an anomaly. It's what they do as a society.
But the thing is that they are doing it through deception, right? In a way that other cultures who have practices which result in deaths
are more transparent.
Because if you go to the United States, there are crimes that the punishment for which is death, right? But that is the result of a long process, okay?
And that's used politically. And,
yes, I do, and I'm not for a second advocating the death penalty. But what I'm saying is that the use of the death penalty in America is more transparent than the burning of Christian by the Haga cult in Midsommar, which
but
I think
it's not if you live in the Haga cult.
No, but that's an insane thing to say because, like, if you
he didn't know the stakes when he went in. Is your point, right?
Yeah, and the cult specifically hides the stakes from him, which is deceptive in a way that most cultures around the world aren't.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
No, I get it.
I as much as I understand the quote, and like I said, you're like putting it in a sort of academic frame.
Anthropologically speaking, they're no different to any other society because they have laws that are based on religious beliefs that have been passed down from generation to generation. But even our laws come from the Ten Commandments, right? It's a biblical text. It's like there's nothing that is natural necessarily about those laws. There's plenty of societies that have killed, that have coveted their neighbour's ox and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, of course.
Right? There's nothing that's inherent, objectively moral about these things, but we agree to them.
Well, that is correct to an extent, but as I said before, you're falling into the trap that the film is setting for you.
But you're supposed to.
No, but I'm not sure that you are, right? Because the trap that the film is setting for you is, I think, that's why I said at the start, this is The Wicker Man for the woke millennial generation, which is that I bet if you asked Ari Aster, one of the things that influences this film is the fact that, rightly or wrongly, there is a great deal of like apologism for things in the world at the moment, right? So a lot of people are, you know, like culturally liberal, socially liberal in a way to allow people to behave as they feel they should, as they feel naturally, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not making a judgment on any particular thing at all, because I definitely fall in the liberal side of things politically. But I think that to some extent, Ari Aster is setting a trap for people like you to be like, no, you can't be upset with people being sewn alive into bear suits, because
I can be upset with it. I am upset with it, but I'm saying they're not. There's nothing inherently wrong with what they're doing.
Well, yeah, but I think that's the trap that you're saying.
Yeah,
but that's because you're viewing it as a if you found out now that there was in real life, if there was like a BBC News article about a like cult which sewed people into bears and burned them alive, right?
Yeah.
Lured tourists to them, and burned them alive in a temple,
yes,
right? You would say that is horrific, and I don't think that you'd be going around going, well, of course, you can't be upset about this, Hannah, because it's actually not horrific based on their things. Because otherwise, why aren't you apologising for?
Yeah, but you're missing the point. I find it horrific.
Yeah, but you're like removing it from the emotion. You're like academic. You're viewing it in an academic framework only, right? You're removing it from the reality of the film, and just being like, well, in an abstract way, you know, actually it's fine, which you could say about anything.
Yeah, but I'm not quite doing it in like a aren't we all the same sort of way. I'm doing it in like I think that it's deliberately done that. So give me a couple of points, right? There's ideas on monogamy that are discussed in the movie. You know, in our society, in the Western Judeo-Christian world, we believe that a life partner should be an unbreakable commitment. Generally speaking, of course, there's exceptions to all of these things, right? But would you agree with that?
Yeah, to some extent.
Whereas this group believe that we have no claim on anyone, and therefore you're committed to nobody, right? One is a Christian belief, one is a pagan belief. Their ideas on suicide are very different. We, in our society, traditionally, and this isn't my belief, but it's, I think this is a Western belief, that suicide is somehow wrong or taboo or selfish and should be somehow prevented. And the village, Hager, believe that it is a person's right to end their own life when they want to, in their own terms, and they welcome it as an alternative to becoming old and degenerating. Both of those are tied to an ideology as well. You know, you've got the traditional Christian ideology, which sees suicide as a sin, and the Hagarians believe that suicide could be seen as part of a natural life cycle.
Yeah.
Right? So that's, you know, I think the movie is... You know, suicide is a theme in the movie. Monogamy is a theme in the movie. They're both shown in different ways. I think that is the point.
Okay, but the thing is that within the context of the narrative, like, I agree broadly with what you're saying in that different cultures have different values, okay? And I understand that you're not saying, and that's why murder is fine.
No.
Right? But also, I would say that the cult in the film are fundamentally dishonest in a way that most cultures are not, right? Their whole culture, their ritual is predicated on dishonesty. They are fundamentally dishonest in their practices.
I don't think this is necessarily a point in the film, but you can say any culture is dishonest.
Well,
we didn't invade Iraq because of freedom of people. We invaded for oil, that kind of thing, right?
Well, that's There's
and
no
murder was
that's not-
committed.
Well, yes, I agree. I mean, this is getting way out
Yeah,
of
I
hand.
know, but
right? No, but the
But
point.
it's wrong to say that no society except the Hungarians are dishonest.
No, I'm not saying that though. What I'm saying is that you can't necessarily take their word for what they say their culture is based on, because
They're trying to use you to sacrifice.
Right, they are fundamentally dishonest to people. Right.
I put my reading on the movie is that if you'd towed the line and thrown yourself in and enjoyed the stuff and got in with it, they wouldn't have killed you.
But the thing is it not like The Wicker Man? Like, in the sense that in The Wicker Man, he goes to Summer Isle, he's stuck up, he doesn't join in with any of the rituals. They have all these ways of life that Christopher Lee's telling you all about. But ultimately, the reason that he is there
He's
is
a
to be
sacrifice.
burned alive.
Right, yeah.
Right? Which is
And
the same as Christian.
no one's saying the Summer Isles are, they're culturally different
Right,
to
yeah,
us.
exactly. Yeah. No one's saying, now one must let isolated cultures behave as they
Yeah,
will.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Not my defense, in my offense.
In mitigation.
Yeah. I think the artifice of the group falls down in a couple of important ways. So, like, I'm not the only person, I think, who could be drawn into it. Like, we see Dani get drawn into it.
Mm-hmm.
You are meant to somehow see it from her perspective and see the good sides of it, and therefore ignore the bad sides of it. That is the point of the film, which is why it's a happy ending with some doubt. I think Ari Aster said as much. I think he said he wanted people to see it as something of a happy ending, but not feel too comfortable about that. When the people in the temple, which is Christian and 2 island villagers, are going to be burned alive, there's some guy comes through and says, like, take from the yew tree and feel no pain. So he's giving them some medicine so they won't feel the pain of being burned alive.
Yeah.
Seconds later, one of them catches fire and is just like screaming in agony. And it's like, right, I think that's put in there to say, after all that, this is nonsense. They're just, there's no pagan magic. There's no fucking connection with nature.
Yeah.
They're just wrong.
And that's why the Swedish government ought to go in there, massacre them all, and turn it into an IKEA.
Yes, exactly. The other thing is that they all said they all raise the babies. They all collectively raise children, but every night scene has a baby just crying itself like senseless, and no one's comforting it.
Yeah.
It's like, then it's collective, just like passing the buck, or
it's like when you live in a house share and you don't do
exactly.
No one wants to do the washing up.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Like, that might be a different thing. Like, maybe it's saying babies are going to cry anyway or something. But it seemed to me that baby wasn't getting quite the nurturing that Pelle suggested it might. Would you say?
Yeah, I agree that it's not being looked after. But then, like, as I'm sure you're aware, as a soon-to-be father yourself, you're supposed to let them cry themselves back to sleep, right?
Competing ideologies on that, mate.
Yeah.
Some believe it's going to traumatise the child. Some believe it's going to be fine.
No competing ideologies on this show, though, obviously.
Yeah, we've gone on about that for a while, haven't we? So, Chris, with all that said, about Midsommar and the Hungarians, how would you survive?
Well, the first one is an obvious one, but and I'll try not to come across as like a smug, school information video here, but don't do drugs, mate. Just don't do them.
Yeah.
That's basically the sole reason behind every one of the deaths in the film, isn't it?
Have you done drugs ever?
I've dabbled in some.
What, paracetamol?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, Calpol.
Yeah.
They are all made to be pliable and vulnerable through the act of taking drugs, correct?
Yes.
I would imagine that Pelle picks the victims he brings back to the cabin, brings back to the cult precisely because they are drug takers. Would you agree?
That would seem to be a logical conclusion, though I don't think it's ever expressed.
No, but I would wager that given that the 6 people that come back that we see all partake in hallucinogenics, I would suggest that there's a certain amount of engineering going on there.
They self-nominate by
exactly
being interested. It's
basically the MO of the cult appears to be go to a university, find some, strapping young men
Or
who
women.
are into drugs. Well, specifically men, because they need people to populate the cult, right?
We'll take 2 girls.
No, as in to impregnate the women of the cult
Right. Yes.
through the ritual that we see. So if you don't do drugs, Pella's probably going to leave you alone. If you don't do drugs when you get to the cult, you're probably going to say, I'm all right for the mushroom tea. Thanks very much.
So you think if they got there and Danny was like, no, I really, I think I'm in a vulnerable state, it would be a terrible idea. That would be completely fair.
Yeah.
Do you think Pella would have gone right on? Or would he been like,
well,
you're in good hands?
I think he has larger designs on her generally, doesn't he?
Evidently.
Yeah. And I think actually that's one of the times where a member of the cult is being honest when he says, I think this could be really good for you. I think this could help you. I
Yeah.
think he's saying that earnestly.
When she's taking the mushrooms and she's having a bad trip, she's like wandering around trying to find, just get out of her own head, I guess.
Yeah.
And his friend, the guy he introduces his brother, but is just like born on the same day or whatever it is.
Yeah, he's the one who burns alive in the temple.
He says, there's someone I'd like to introduce you to, or like, come meet my friend.
Yeah.
I think because he recognises the value of community in the grieving process. I think it's an accident, right?
Okay.
You're looking at me like with those
No, it's
those impatient eyes.
No,
of
it's
yours.
not. It's the like in when you or I enjoy a film, like you willfully look for as much as you can from it.
Yeah, why not?
It's the old directorial intent thing of like, oh yeah, well, of course he meant that because I can see it in the film. Therefore, he meant it.
Why would you put it in their voice?
Yeah, no, it's a fair point.
I think the guy's on a laptop as well, which is like the only technology in the film after that point.
Have you got any ideas?
Yeah. People with children, cover their ears because I'm going to turn the air blue. Don't be a cunt.
Yeah. Who specifically are you talking about?
All of them.
Danny?
No, Danny's all right. Danny's
Simon?
which one's
Connie?
Simon?
Simon is the English man, and Connie is his fiance.
Very judgmental people.
No stomach.
Yeah.
No stomach for seeing people plunged off a cliff and having their face smashed
up
in
with
by
a
a
hammer.
hammer.
Yeah, I think they... Yeah, when you put it that way. I mean, don't piss on the tree, but that could be a made-up thing, couldn't it? About the tree.
I think that's genuine, but
He looks pretty upset, doesn't he?
yeah.
Falling on his knees, crying.
He's the one who murders Josh, I think, and also Mark.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's the one wearing Mark's face when he
Okay.
kills Josh.
I assumed it was the chappie who was the result of inbreeding.
No, I think they flay Mark, which is why when you see him later being put in the temple, he's basically like a scarecrow that's wearing Mark's skin. Cool stuff.
Do you think don't be a C word would help?
Yeah,
him?
I think absolutely, and I think
Like,
it plays into my other idea, which is just to respect foreign cultures,
Yeah.
because Josh and Christian basically treat the cult as subjects for their studies rather than people and a distinct culture, and particularly Josh, who winds up dead as a result of his disrespectful nature.
Yeah. Because he's like, for God's sake, this is a holy book. Don't
take a picture of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Is how he says it. That's from the trailer. Yeah, but then I did think, would that necessarily stop them killing you?
No, I mean that's the point, isn't it? It's like, would Edward Woodward have, if he'd been like embracing it, would they have still killed him?
Yeah, because
he's a
they need his sacrifice, right?
Yeah, because he's a
So,
virgin who is from outside the culture, and then to burn him.
Yeah, exactly.
So he could have been like, oh, fucking yes, let's get on with it, guys.
Yeah,
I love
shagging it up.
love
Well, I
a
guess
parade.
actually, if he'd been a shagger, then he wouldn't have been an appropriate sacrifice anyway.
I guess they were really making sure it was.
Well, because the whole point is that they're trying to tempt him they're trying to prove that he's a pure sacrifice, right? By seeing how
having
he
a woman
resists
rub
temptation.
herself on his door at night.
Exactly.
I mean, that always gets you. doesn't
Great
it?
stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, that's that.
Yeah,
Midsommar nailed.
absolutely.
See you next midweek. That's Wednesday
Yeah.
for a M. Night Shyamalan
Yeah.
classic, The Sixth Sense.
Should be an interesting one
with
to try and
a
survive.
twist you'll never see coming.
Yeah.
That, and followed by the week after, Signs.
Mm.
It's good M. Night Shyamalan season.
Yes.
On the How
Good
to Survive
in
podcast.
inverted commas. We'll find out if it really has held up.
Yeah.
If you're expecting the mailbag at this point, then you may have missed last week's episode when we launched our Patreon and announced the How to Survive mailbag episodes, which is a Patreon exclusive to our Camp Counselors tier, where basically emails and things have been shifted there because we can't always expect people to listen every week if they haven't seen the film, whereas the mailbag is spoiler free, friendly to all ears, and we'll discuss all sorts of things basically,
and it's a bit more of a community as well. We want people to talk and have conversations and come back week to week and talk about the films they like. And what we said as well is it doesn't need to be about movies.
No, not at all. Like if you can't decide what fad diet you want to subscribe to or where you want to go on holiday, then we will help you survive those tough life decisions.
Think of us as your agony aunts.
Yes.
Your aunts in agony.
Yeah, and you can email howtosurviveshow@gmail.com with that specifically, or any other thoughts that you have. If you've got thoughts about a specific film that we're covering, then if you want to talk about The Sixth Sense or whatever, we'll endeavour to include them in the show for that episode. But we want to encourage a bit more just general communication, because that would be good fun. So howtosurviveshow@gmail.com, at howtosurvivepod on Twitter, and of course you can comment on our Patreon posts to get in touch with us.
Patreon.com/howtosurvivepod.
Yes.
Well, that's it. Goodbye. No, not really. That is it, though.
Yeah. Skull!
That's cheers.
Yeah,
I remember. I was there.
It's not very respectful of other people's cultures to forget what their
way of
cheersing is.
Yeah. All right. See you next week. Bye bye.
Skull.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Joe, I've just seen a tweet that I wanted to read out for you. As a father-to-be, I wanted to see how this would affect you emotionally. You ready?
Yeah.
So someone called Lauren tweets, "This man I work with is a single dad with a 15-year-old daughter who's recently turned vegan, and every time I see him, he asks me what I'm having for lunch that day and writes it down for her if he thinks it's something she'd like."
That's nice.
Yeah.
But only if he thinks it's something she'd like. So he's like, "Oh, it's a chickpea salad," and he's like,
"She'd fucking hate that,
Yeah,
mate.
don't know about
Fucking
that,
hate that, mate."
That's nice, though.
It is nice.
It's nice.
I was wondering whether it would just send you into like racking sobs.
No, I haven't sobbed yet over my child, but
Right.
we're minus 6 months, so there's plenty of time to do it.
Cool. Well, that doesn't really go anywhere. So,
Fine, mate. Make it a Patreon episode. We'll charge them for it.